guys, it's Nik the Booksmith. Welcome back, welcome back. I have this folder full of paper to make some signatures and figured it was time. It's time to do something. What I think I will do is I will put together my signatures first and get that out of the way, and then that way I'll know how big to make the cover. Okay, let's see if I can get through this without devolving into a complete coughing fit. So right now, all I'm going to do is fold up these papers in half and give them a light crease. I don't care about the size of the papers right now. I'm not even stacking them together as of yet. Just everything is getting a light crease so that it's easier to select the papers that I want and then stacking them into signatures. And then once all that is done, I can figure out how big I want these signatures to be and I can trim them down. There's not a whole lot of rhyme or reason to any of this yet. I know, surprise, surprise, right? But hopefully it'll make sense when I'm finished here. I was just listening to the trial going on with the shooting that happened a couple of years ago on the movie set. Remember, the movie Rust was being filmed with Alec Baldwin, and the trial that's going on right now is for the armorer. Supposedly, they are the one that is ultimately responsible for all of the weapons on the set. And as I'm listening to Emily D. Baker, she's a lawyer. If you don't know who she is, go check her out, her YouTube channel. I'm sitting here and I'm going, why are there guns, firearms of any sort, allowed on a movie set? I mean, call me crazy, doesn't really seem like a very safe thing to have, especially when you're pointing the guns at the camera and other people, right? During the trial, they're showing what the blanks and the dummy rounds are supposed to look like. Some of them are really hard to distinguish from live rounds. And I was like, that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. That's like making Tylenol look like Skittles. Why would you do that? Right after the shooting happened, there was an armorer also that works in Hollywood that said that the reason why they use real weapons was because it's difficult to reproduce something that would look authentic. And I'm like, really? They can make it look like Sandra Bullock is floating in space, but it's impossible to build a prop gun that doesn't look real? Am I missing something here? So anyway, probably going a little overboard on this, but it's something that just seems like a no-brainer. You know, in this day and age, we should be able to make a decently believable prop gun that looks authentic. I don't know. There's still kids getting shot in the streets because they're carrying a BB gun that looks like a Glock. So I don't know. Maybe Hollywood needs to get with Hasbro because they seem to have a handle on it. Okay, I will stop ranting. As you can see, I am trimming the edges of these papers. I kind of figured out how wide I wanted my signatures to be and measured, trimming off anything that's hanging over that. I think it ended up being like 5 1/4, maybe inches wide. And also the height. I think the height ended up being like 8 1/4 or 8.5 inches, something like that. It doesn't really matter. I could pick whatever I wanted because I'm making the cover afterward. Next, I took a piece of paper and I marked 4 spots where the holes would be. And it's basically about a 1/2 inch from the top, 1/2 inch from the bottom. And then I made sure that they're all evenly spaced away from each other. And then I could use that template to put in the middle of my signatures, and I could transfer where those marks are as holes into the fold of the signature. Then next, I'm going to cut a strip of this black fabric, and this will be for my binding. This is a piece of black cardstock that I punched a hole for each of the 6 signatures that match the 4 holes I just punched. And this cardstock gets glued onto the back of the fabric, And that will just help me keep those signatures sewn on in an even fashion. Then I went ahead and I let that dry, and I took my needle and poked through the fabric where those holes are. I start sewing on the signatures one at a time, and I thread the needle through the bottom hole, and then I figure eight all the way up to the top hole, and then I turn it around and I do the opposite all the way back down, and then I tie the two ends together. And that's how each of the 6 signatures are tied onto that binding piece. Once everything is all sewn together onto the binding, it's time to reinforce it. So I put a coat of glue on the back of the binding over the stitches and that cardstock. And then on top of that, I put on a piece of fabric. It's like starched cheesecloth, but you can use a piece of muslin or any thin open weave fabric should do. And then I put another coat of glue over the top of that. And that really seals in those stitches. And then another piece of the black cardstock that is the same size as the one I punched the holes in gets placed over the top of that fabric, and everything gets sealed in between 2 pieces of cardstock. To start the cover, I'm going to take this piece of matte board and give it a coat of cheap acrylic craft paint in black on the front and the back. Similar to the project I did in the last video, I let the laser engraver put the image on the cover that I wanted. If you missed that video, you can go check it out, but there's other things you can do. If you don't have a laser engraver, you can print out an image and put it on the cover, or you could do some hand painting or stenciling. There's all kinds of things you can do. And once that was engraved, I gave everything a sanding over the top just to age that black paint a little bit. I didn't want it to look too shiny and new. And then I coated the covers, the front and back covers, with a coat of matte varnish. And I do that on the front and the back. Once it's dry, I give everything another sanding to smooth everything out. And I wipe away all the little pieces as I'm going so it doesn't get caught underneath the sandpaper. And I do probably about 3 or 4 sessions of sanding on the covers. And then I'll do another coat of the varnish over the top at the end, and then give it a little bit of a buffing like I did in that last video. I left the fabric a little long on this spine, so I'm just going to trim it down to be the height of that cardstock. Okay, bear with me. This is going to be a little difficult to explain. This is 4-inch wide black book tape. I'm putting it on some of the backing paper from some shipping labels. Yeah, I'm a dork. I keep that stuff. Now this piece of cardstock is the same width as my spine, plus a 6mm hinge gap on either side. So it's 50 millimeters plus 6 and 6, which makes 62. And I draw around that to give me a guideline so that I can cut off the strips on either side just from this backing paper. And what that will allow me to do is to adhere my front and back covers to the sticky part of that book tape. And then I still have the space in the middle that will allow for the spine width and my hinge gaps. I hope that makes some sense. And now I'm just going to fold over the overlap at the top and the bottom. And with the bone folder, I will crease that down and make sure it's all stuck in place. Now I'm going to cut off the 6mm hinge gaps on each side. And what that allows for is now there is a 6mm space on either side of that spine where it's sticky. So when I put the text block inside and I close it around and I get it all centered, I can take the bone folder and press it down into that hinge gap groove, and it will stick to my text block, the little flaps that are left over. And then all I have to do is brush glue on the remainder of that little flap so that they will stick to the inside of each cover, front and back. Before I stick down the front cover, I'm going to put a piece of this cardstock in place of that middle strip. And I could have done that ahead of time. Probably should have, but you know me and foresight. Foresight? Never heard of her. And now that that is all stuck down, I will go ahead and put glue on this flap as well. And then the book block will be completely installed inside. And now I'm just going to take this paper that I printed just some old ledger images on, and I'm sticking those down to the inside of the front and back cover as liners so that you don't see, where I just glued everything down. And I ended up using spray adhesive because I didn't want a bunch of moisture from the glue to warp the covers. And now I'm just gluing down the flaps on this policy envelope that I sewed into the middle of the first signature. And that, as they say, is that. We are all finished. And I will put in a few documents just to kind of hang out here and there. And there we go. I think it looks pretty much like an authentic old book cover. But like I said before, you don't have to make your own book cover. You can use a book cover that already exists. You can even make it bigger or smaller by removing those covers from the spine and making a new spine like I did with this book. So the options are many. You don't have to have a laser engraver. You can do this kind of a method with printed images or hand painting or stenciling or whatever you'd like to do. But I hope you enjoyed this process today. I hope it gave you some inspiration, whether you learned anything or not. Thank you all for hanging out with me. I really appreciate it. And I will see you all really, really soon in the next video. Bye, guys.